wrist with a use lamp and a pick. I'm thankful and blessed for the fans that I get that. I love my life how it is. Watch I get big. I love my life how it is. Okay, everyone, we'll just get started in a minute. If everyone could make their way inside and make your way to your seats. Thank you. Okay, let's get this rolling. So, hello everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of the Alliance meeting. I'm very glad to see everyone is back here in person today, and welcome again to all those joining us virtually. Just to introduce myself, my name is Gethin Thomas, and I'm a member of the Alliance board, as well as being the Director of Research for MND Australia. And I am the moderator for this section. If you missed them yesterday, we had some fantastic presentations, so be sure to look back at the recordings, and these will be available on the virtual event platform very soon. I also hope you've all been engaging with the FeedLoop platform or through the app. This conference is all about connection with each other and with our community, and especially with those with lived experience. As you all know, they are at the centre of everything we do. As you know, the fundamental rights for PALs and CALs drives our work. There's a flyer on each of your tables with the highlights from our fundamental rights survey. It also has a QR code so you can read the outcomes of that survey in more depth. I very strongly recommend you do that. It's a fantastic insights. This is also part of the reason why the Alliance was the perfect fit to take over the leadership of the Patient Fellows program this year. This program supports people with lived experience in attending the MND Association's International Symposium on ALS and MND in person or virtually, and also they obviously get to attend the Alliance meeting and the Allied Professionals Forum. As the new leader of the program, we really hope that we can expand the program's international reach and have fellows from all over the world contributing to this. We fundamentally believe that people living with ALS, MND and their caregivers must be part of every conversation. And by bridging the gap between patients, healthcare professionals, researchers and other collaborators, we believe that we can accelerate progress towards effective treatments and ultimately a cure for ALS, MND. Now, on to the programming for today. To start us off, we'll be presenting the 2024 Student Innovation Award. And to present the award, please join me in welcome Pablo Aquino to the stage.
Thank you, Gethin. Hello, my name is Pablo Aquino. I am the Secretary of the ALS Association of Argentina. Well, I guess most of you know me. I'm a member of the International Alliance, of the Board of Directors of the International Alliance of MND. Actually, this was my last year, but it was a pleasure and a privilege to be here. So it is my pleasure to present the Student Innovation Award. The Alliance launched this award in 2023 to encourage awareness of ALS-MND among students worldwide. It helps showcase students' innovative ideas to improve the quality of life of people living with the disease and drive innovation within the ALS-MND space. This year, the award goes to 3 medical students in Colombia: Valeria Otalora Garcés, Valentina González Márquez, and Luisa María Hormizda Infante. Over the past 3 years, these students have put in countless hours of work driven by their desire to help patients and their families dealing with rare diseases. They began by focusing on cystic fibrosis, creating a digital tool that allowed medical professionals to share their knowledge and experience with this disease with each other. This success inspired them to take on an even greater challenge, ALS-MND. Valeria, Valentina, and Luisa Maria connected with the Colombian ALS Association, Asociación Colombiana de ALS, to understand the needs of patients, caregivers, and healthcare providers. From this collaboration, they developed 2 digital tools that are already making a difference. The first is an electronic guide for caregivers, doctors, and patients with a wide range of information on ALS-MND, from the description of the disease to patient care, nutrition, recommendations, and progressive management. The second is an app that tracks the progression of ALS-MND. These tools are now being used by the Colombian ALS-MND community, and these young women have presented their findings in journals and at conferences. And they're not stopping here. They are currently working on a new project that uses brain-computer interface technology to help people living with ALS-MND control devices. They are inspiration for current and future generations, and we are fortunate to have them in our community. Valeria, Valentina, and Luisa Maria couldn't be here with us today, so we recorded their acceptance of the award. And let's see the video.
Buenas tardes. Nos sentimos profundamente agradecidos y honrados de haber recibido el Student Innovation Award de la International Alliance of ALS-MND Associations. Este reconocimiento es un reflejo del esfuerzo, dedicación y pasión que hemos invertido en el desarrollo de nuestras aplicaciones para pacientes con esclerosis lateral amiotrófica.
Queremos agradecer a todos los miembros de la International Alliance of ALS-MND Associations por brindar una plataforma tan significativa para la innovación en el ámbito de la salud. Este premio no solo valida nuestro trabajo, sino que también refuerza nuestra determinación de continuar contribuyendo a la mejora de la calidad de vida de los pacientes y sus cuidadores.
También queremos expresar nuestro agradecimiento a nuestro mentor, el ingeniero Mauricio Plaza, familiares y amigos, cuyo apoyo ha sido fundamental a lo largo de este proyecto. Finalmente, dedicamos este logro a todos los pacientes de ELA, cuya fortaleza y resiliencia nos han inspirado a buscar soluciones que promuevan su bienestar y autonomía. Este premio es solo el comienzo y seguimos comprometidas en seguir desarrollando tecnología que puedan marcar una diferencia real en la vida de las personas que viven con ELA. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Valeria, Valentina, and Luisa Maria. Okay, I think I need to stay here, right? So yes, now we have a presentation from the ALS Association of Argentina, and I happen to be from Argentina, so I'm going to stay here. Last year we presented a project, a social project, about social aspects of patients with ALS-MND in Argentina. We presented that in Switzerland with my colleague Dario. And you want to come to the stage? I will invite Dario to come here. He's the president of the ALS Association of Argentina. So we presented the first outcomes of that project, and we told you last year that we were going to come back to Montreal and present the results and the last stage of this social project. So I will invite you now to see another video. So that's it. Okay, let's play the video.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Somos sociólogas del equipo de investigación social de Asociación ELA Argentina y hoy estamos presentando los resultados del relevamiento realizado por la asociación en el marco del proyecto de investigación Problemáticas sociales asociadas a la ELA en Argentina, los pacientes y su entorno afectivo familiar. La investigación se desarrolló en 2 etapas. La primera, de marzo a agosto de 2023, fue cualitativa. La segunda, en la que se centra esta presentación, utilizó datos cuantitativos obtenidos a través de una encuesta online realizada en julio de 2023. La encuesta, de 78 preguntas, fue respondida por familiares de personas con ELA, quienes aportaron información sobre su situación y la del paciente. Se recopilaron datos federales de alrededor de 200 personas, abarcando diversas variables sociodemográficas y psicosociales.
El análisis de la encuesta se realizó entre febrero y mayo del 2024 y los resultados se organizaron en 9 temas principales, que comprenden desde datos generales sobre las personas con ELA, como edad, género, educación, información geográfica, detalles sobre la situación económica y del hogar, hasta aspectos emocionales y de salud, como diagnóstico, tratamientos, cobertura médica. También se incluyeron aspectos como la organización de la vida cotidiana, los cambios en la actividad laboral y el impacto de la dinámica familiar, entre otros temas. En la presentación de hoy, por cuestiones de extensión, hemos tomado únicamente algunos de ellos.
Bueno, vamos entonces a la variable de datos generales de las personas que viven con ELA. Tenemos la dimensión de género y, coherente con los estudios internacionales, la distribución por género muestra una predominancia masculina, con un 66% de los casos de ELA relevados frente a la femenina, representada en un 33% de los casos.
En la dimensión de edad y también en línea con estudios previos, se observa que la mayor cantidad de casos se comienza a concentrar a partir de los 50 años de edad, aumentando levemente entre los 60 y 69 años y siendo similar entre los 70 y los 79. Es decir, entre los 50 y los 79 años de edad se concentra el 76% de los casos.
Vamos ahora a la variable relacionada con datos geográficos de las personas que viven con ELA. Aquí tenemos 2 dimensiones, que son provincia de residencia y tipo de urbanización. Se observa que los hogares de las personas que viven con ELA se ubican mayoritariamente, un 83%, en urbanizaciones de más de 50.000 habitantes, definidas como ciudades. Es menor el porcentaje que se localiza en pueblos, un 14%, y zonas rurales, un 2%. Es decir, que cantidad de casos y densidad poblacional están alineados. La mayor concentración de casos, como se observa en el mapa, se encuentra en la provincia más poblada de Argentina, que es Buenos Aires, y se observa en color rojo oscuro.
En relación a la variable de economía familiar e ingresos, tenemos como primera dimensión la de condiciones de vida. En la tabla se observa que el 44% de los hogares se encontraban bajo la línea de pobreza. Este dato se obtiene sumando los hogares que están en la categoría de pobreza, que comprenden un 26%, y aquellos que por sus ingresos están bajo la línea de indigencia, en un 18%. Recordamos que estos datos fueron relevados en julio del 2023 y es probable que si se realiza una nueva medición haya muchos más hogares de personas con ELA viviendo en la pobreza, ya que desde entonces la inflación en Argentina ha superado el 230% interanual.
Pasamos ahora a la variable de proceso diagnóstico. Se incluyó la pregunta tipo de ELA como una opción múltiple. Del total de respuestas recopiladas, un 42% representa la opción ELA motor, el 24% ELA vulvar, el 13% ELA lateral primaria y el tipo familiar está representado en un 2%. Por otro lado, el 19% de las respuestas optaron por no sabe, no contesta. Intuimos que posiblemente esto se deba a las demoras en la obtención del diagnóstico que es un dato al que haremos referencia.
En relación al proceso de diagnóstico, las personas con ELA han referido vivir situaciones de peregrinaje previas a su definición, en las que recibían, por ejemplo, diagnósticos erróneos o habían hallazgos que derivaban en atención de otras patologías. Se observa que en un 43% se recibió un diagnóstico en menos de 6 meses. En cambio, en la mayoría de los pacientes, en un 57%, demoró más de un año en obtenerlo.
Pasamos ahora a lo referido a la cobertura de salud y tratamientos. Un 96% de los encuestados cuenta con algún tipo de cobertura médica, ya sea pública o privada. Sin embargo, la calidad de la atención y la disponibilidad de tratamientos varían considerablemente. La mayoría de los participantes reportó dificultades para acceder a medicamentos esenciales y terapias especializadas.
Acerca del tratamiento medicamentoso, se puede observar que el 80% del total de las personas que respondieron que toma alguna medicación, la mayoría toma Ribuzol en un 59%, mientras que un 11% toma Gorfetan y un 10% toma Edarabone.
Vamos ahora a lo referido a la organización de la vida cotidiana. Tomamos acá una dimensión que es asistencia en actividades diarias. Como se desarrolló en el informe cualitativo que presentamos el año pasado en esta misma instancia internacional, la progresiva pérdida de autonomía es una problemática que atraviesan las personas que viven con ELA e impacta en sus entornos. Se relevó si la persona diagnosticada requiere ayuda o asistencia diaria para realizar las tareas cotidianas y la respuesta fue abrumadora. Un 92% contestó que sí.
Bueno, acerca de las actividades recreativas, se observa que una marcada tendencia en detrimento de la realización de actividades recreativas por parte de las personas que viven con ella, ya que un 94% manifiesta que no realiza actividades de este tipo o realiza pocas. Solo un 5% expresó que el familiar aludido realizaba muchas actividades de esparcimiento.
Pasamos ahora a lo que tiene que ver con el impacto psicosocial y la dimensión comunitaria. El informe también destaca el impacto psicosocial de la ELA en los pacientes y en sus familias. Sin embargo, es un aspecto en el que no nos detendremos hoy. En líneas generales, sí se puede decir que la mayoría de los encuestados señaló un incremento en los niveles de estrés y ansiedad, así como una mayor necesidad de apoyo psicológico y comunitario.
En el sentido de lo que llamamos comunidad ELA, se puede observar en la tabla y el gráfico que la mayoría de las personas, en un 64%, se ha contactado con grupos o asociaciones relacionadas con la enfermedad, destacando la importancia que tienen como recurso de orientación y contención.
Bueno, para finalizar, podemos decir que este relevamiento aporta, en una primera aproximación, una valiosa base de datos federal con visión amplia y detallada de distintos aspectos relacionados con la ELA en Argentina. Es por eso que ofrece una fuente inédita de información para comprender mejor esta enfermedad y sus implicancias sociales. Espera ser también un punto de partida para futuras investigaciones y para la formulación de estrategias que puedan aliviar la carga de esta enfermedad en la población afectada, los pacientes y sus familias.
Les agradecemos su atención y los invitamos a leer el informe completo.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Marcela, we have one there. We have a microphone. He's coming. Bueno, te traduzco la pregunta.
Hi, Marcela from the ALS Association in Colombia, ACELA. There was a number that brought my attention, which was 64% of the people contacted ALS associations of patients. Why do you think that number is so low, and what do you think could be done to get to more patients, reach more patients in the country?
64% contactaron
La puedo hacer en español si quiere.
No, it's okay. ¿Y por qué no llegaron a más? ¿Por qué el número es tan bajo? ¿Por qué no? Que contactaron a la asociación ELA.
Es un número bastante importante.
Okay, yes, it's not a low number, but yes, there are still people that we need to reach. There's another foundation also in Argentina, but we've been around since 2011. So it's a large country. It's a very large country, as you know. It's a vast territory, and it's very unequal in terms of social aspects. There's a lot of inequities, and there's a series of factors too. The health system is hybrid too. It's very mixed. You have the publicly held system, the privately held system, and then you have people that just don't have any health insurance, then they just go to a public hospital. And a public hospital in Buenos Aires is not the same as a public hospital up in the north. We believe there's people that they don't know they have ALS. We also believe that. We have, this is just a transpolation from the worldwide numbers. We have around 3,000 patients with ALS in Argentina, but that's, again, not because we have an official ALS registry, which we will try to do next year, to have an official ALS registry. But we think that about half of those patients probably they don't know that they actually have ALS. So the delay with diagnosis is again a problem also in Argentina. And there's a serious factor, but that number has been increasing. That's a good thing. The number of people who actually get in contact with the association. And then it's almost 70%, yeah.
Thank you. We have questions from the chat. So Lynn from the International ALS-MND Consortium says, how is ALS being promoted to the government to increase services? So I think you kind of responded a little bit, but.
Say the question again.
How is ALS being promoted to the government to increase services?
Okay, ¿cómo se promociona para el gobierno? Digamos, ¿cómo se impulsa a nivel gubernamental la ELA para mejorar los servicios? Es una pregunta del chat.
Bueno, es una, digamos, tenemos en cuanto a la visibilidad, comentar que, ¿qué significa impulsar?
¿Responde?
No entiendo, ¿qué significa impulsar?
Yeah, I don't know the point of the question exactly, but I guess how we engage the government, how we as an association engage the government.
To increase services, yeah.
Claro. ¿Cómo nos conectamos con el gobierno para mejorar los servicios, para aumentar los servicios? ¿Cómo nos contactamos nosotros con el gobierno, con la clase política, con los funcionarios? ¿Cómo es nuestro contacto, nuestra relación para lograr una mejora en los servicios?
Nosotros somos una organización privada y somos una más de 8.000 enfermedades poco frecuentes que hay. En la medida que tengamos alguna necesidad, hacemos algún contacto legislativo como para poder promover algo, pero en realidad hay una ley argentina, como está establecido en este estudio, que da cobertura al 94% de las personas con ELA. Está clarísimo.
The way we approach government is that, first of all, we are of course we are a private NGO, and we are one of many rare diseases. We only approach the government, whether that is the Congress, the the legislative power or whether that is the executive power. Only when it's needed for something like, for example, what I was talking about yesterday in the panel, the advocacy panel, when we need like an ALS registry law, for example. But then the Argentine national health law, it's pretty inclusive in terms of getting people covered. If anyone in Argentina has a confirmed diagnosis and they have a Riluzole prescription, for example, they must be covered, whether they have insurance or not. So that's a positive aspect of Argentina. But again, as I said yesterday in the advocacy panel, of course, you do have medical insurances, whether state held or whether privately held or whether union health. That's another kind of medical insurance in Argentina that they just say no. They reject any prescription just as a default answer, and then they expect the patient to present or to submit some kind of legal measure, some protecting measure, right? And we help them doing that. We help patients doing that. We support them throughout that very bureaucratic process, and all the times that we do that, finally the medical insurance has to cover. But you know, if 2 out of 10 times the patient doesn't present any legal measure, well, that's a gain for them. But that's always a hassle that we need to get involved in. But as regards government, again, to go to the point of the question, we only approach the Congress or executive officials only when it's really necessary for something very specific. But the services are guaranteed by law in Argentina. Then what happens in practice, that's a different thing. But the services are guaranteed by law, which is an advantage compared to other countries, yeah. Sorry, that was kind of a long answer, I'm sorry.
Just back down here from Fight MND here.
Oh, okay.
Great data. What are your next steps taking that data forward?
Okay. Muy buena información. ¿Cuáles son los próximos pasos?
El estudio epidemiológico. Esto es una base para hacerlo ahora.
Well,
Contarle la beca en nombre de mi papá.
This study will serve as a basis, as a foundation for the epidemiological study that we will be conducting next year. We set up a specific scholarship of $20,000, and we already have 4 ALS experts working on that, which will be part of hopefully the first official ALS registry in Argentina. The name of that scholarship is Leon Riva, which is Dario's father name. And yeah, and $20,000, it's a lot in Argentina. It's a lot. If you go into Google and do the exchange rate, it's quite a lot of money. But yeah, so to answer your question, this study will serve as a foundation for that registry.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great. Thank you, Pablo and Dario. We'll have to move on now. Any more questions? Please catch up with Pablo and Dario, or they can answer your questions online. Thank you again. Right, up next we have Jean Swidler, Mindy Uhab and Cassandra Haddad presenting their talk on gene-specific education and need for genetic ALS and FTD families. So these presenters are from the End of Legacy organisation, which is doing a fantastic job of advocating for people carrying gene mutations in MND. So take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is Jean Swidler. My family is impacted by the C9orf72 repeat expansion, and I'm the part-time executive director of Genetic ALS and FTD and the Legacy. We were here last year, not here, but in Basel at this meeting, and we presented on our peer support initiatives. Today we're back speaking about some of our education initiatives. So, and we just want to highlight how appreciative we are for everyone's support. Gethin for those very kind comments, the Alliance staff who've been so supportive and nice to us, and so many friends and allies. So, Genetic ALS and FTD is a community-led nonprofit. We are proudly affiliated with the ALS Hope Foundation, and we are focused on providing education and support resources to, promoting, and advocating for the genetic ALS and FTD community. So today we have just a few members of our team with us. Cassandra Haddad is a nurse practitioner in a family impacted by SOD1 ALS, and she is amazing. And Mindy Urlaub is in a family impacted by C9orf72, and is a published author and worked on the recent NASM report on ALS. And with that, I will give it over to Cassandra.
Thanks, Jean. So what did the landscape of accessible genetic education look like before our events? Well, historically, families were largely told that ALS genetically is very rare. And while genetic ALS and FTD is rare, it's not rare within our family trees or even in our daily lives. Our families were told not to worry, genetic cures are on the horizon. But they've been told that for decades now. And some families only ever saw their genes in a list without any details such as penetrance even discussed. We believed our families deserved not just more, but better information. And they needed it to hear it from their peers, from families like theirs that are impacted. We knew the genetic community was looking for information, and we expected a large turnout. In order to reach our impacted families around the world, we developed a plan to host several webinars. Each one would take a deep dive on a separate gene and feature not only an expert from the field, but a peer who is actively participating in research. We wanted to disseminate whatever information is out there to families that are directly impacted. For example, we wanted to ensure that families impacted by SOD1, like mine, knew about Qalsody. The other advantage of discussing genes one at a time in the larger landscape of ALS and FTD is it is hard to find dedicated time to focus on genetics, much less specific genes, which are a microcosm in the rare disease space. In addition to the webinars I just spoke about, we also developed the first patient-facing genetic summaries. We will continue to roll these out for the various genes that impact our community. We hope to continue the webinar series due to the overwhelmingly positive feedback that we'll share with you today. We're proud to report that we had 367 people register for our webinars. The goal is to have participants watch with their families as a means to facilitate conversation and information sharing. As they are freely available on our website and YouTube channel, hundreds more have gotten a chance to watch. One note is that the registrations mirror the genetic population prevalence, as you can see on this slide. For 3 of our webinars, 100% of participants felt we met the goal of providing information about available research and why some choose to participate in research. Post-event surveys were used to ensure that we were meeting the needs of our community. For the C9 webinar, an interesting note was that our community is asking for info on C9 FTD trials, but currently there are none available. And that is one of our messages to the scientific and care communities. We must break down the silos between ALS and FTD. We heard this message loud and clear at this very conference yesterday as well. As you can see here, 100% of participants in the SOD webinar felt that it was informative. I'll take credit for that one. And the same thing here for GRN. And I'll turn it over to Mindy.
As you can see, 75% of the viewers would be more likely to consider enrolling in research. As you can see, 75% of the viewers would more likely be considering enrolling in research as a result of seeing this webinar. This is the real goal of this effort, to continue to shepherd our community into studies. In fact, while watching our webinars, some of our community members signed up for studies on their own accord. 85% of responders said that they were personally impacted by the C9 gene mutation. 41% said that they were personally impacted by SOD1. 44% said they were personally affected by the progranulin mutations. 66% said that they were personally affected by TAR-DBT. For these rare mutations that are of great interest to many, having so many personally impacted means we are reaching exactly who we want to reach. For the C9 webinar, respondents said that information on the internet can be overwhelming, but they were less confused after our presentation. You can expect that information that people find on the internet is mostly geared for academic audiences, so our webinars provide lay people with the information they're looking for. For the SOD1 presentation, viewers said that hearing from other peers made their learning about genetic mutations easier. Genetically inherited ALS might be rare, but we make our viewers realize that they are not alone in learning about it. For the GRN webinar, a researcher said they were going to use it as a tool for newly diagnosed patients. There are so many academic papers out there about genetically inherited ALS and FTD, but End the Legacy has put this information into an easily understood format that makes patients feel less alone. We have patient-facing written guides on our website for C9 and progranulin. We're very proud of our written guides, and it's clear that readers are benefiting from them. And if you're interested in learning more about educational experiences and opportunities, please go to our website, and please don't be shy about sharing with your friends. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any questions for Jean, Mindy, or Cassandra? Can I just start off with one? So it's a little perhaps off topic, but obviously the ideal way to get tested is through genetic counselling first, pre and post, and then obviously through a formal genetic testing program. Have you found that many people in your organisation have got their genetic results perhaps through something like 23andMe or the direct-to-consumer testing? And what are your thoughts around that? Is it a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, just to clarify, we are huge supporters of genetic counseling as a field, and it is an essential part of people pursuing genetic testing for themselves or their families. And we do not believe that actually patient-facing genetic testing is really a big thing for these genes because they're not in 23andMe. You know, I guess people can do whole genome sequencing or something, but even finding where the C9 expansion, for instance, would be pretty hard, I think, for a layperson. So most people are getting them through either studies or doctor's orders. Now, there is an issue with doctors ordering genetic testing for people based on their request without ensuring they get genetic counseling. So that is something that might be happening, but that is through a medical channel. And our information is not to replace genetic counseling. It's just some added information for folks. And many have said to us that having some of this basic factual information before they speak to a genetic counselor really allows them to spend more time speaking about the personal impacts in their life rather than learning facts in the discussion. I don't know if Mindy or Cassandra has a feedback.
I would just say, as a nurse practitioner, patients often come to me. I'm typically in family practice, except for an exceptional one day a month that I get to spend with Dr. Terry Hyman Patterson. But I really discourage patients from doing 23andMe for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's not clean testing, and number two, privacy. So it's been all over the news lately that these companies are getting sold and the data is getting shared. And if you've ever seen a report come back, it's like over 20 pages long, and then you have to pay an additional service for a data scrubber to try and pull these things out. So I think our message as End the Legacy is please do this in combination with genetic counseling, and to the community at large is maybe steer clear of these sites.
Yeah, I think we have a worldwide shortage of genetic counsellors, unfortunately, and please encourage your children to study genetic counselling. We need more. Are there any questions online? Nope. Okay, next, what's your next plans? Where are you going next with your, because that information you've already provided looked fantastic. What's next what's the next cab off the rank?
Our biggest next step is the white paper that was just published on the guidance for the community and disseminating that information out around the world to let members of our community know that care is indicated if that's what you choose to participate in, and there is a place for monitoring. So we greatly appreciate all of the efforts of research. However, our community also deserves personal care and monitoring, and we are just thrilled to have participated in writing this guideline and seeing it published now. And we did pay for open access, so if you want to read the paper in full, please head to our website and you can access it for free.
Hi, I have a question. Sarah Maguire from ALS Canada. Congratulations on these fabulous webinars. My question may be something you already answered last year, so I apologize. I'm wondering if you've explored through your peer support model actual support groups where people are connecting for experiences as opposed to just information.
I can answer that one. We have a peer support hour that I'm one of the facilitators of, and it happens, once a month. It's about once a month, and there's 3 facilitators, and we often have people showing up who are asking questions like, "I've lost 27 members of my family. Should I get genetic testing?" And for us, we don't give any medical advice. We literally just listen, we reflect back, we sort of speak with each other and try to support each other about tough decisions. Sometimes people come on and they're just really, really upset. They just saw a loved one pass away from ALS, or they're a caregiver and also a genetic carrier. And as you can imagine, being part of the genetic community, we kind of live in a special kind of hell, because we see our family members pass away from FTD and ALS, and we don't necessarily feel like other people in the ALS community can relate to us in this way, because it's just different for us, and so we're there for each other. And I think it's very beneficial for people. We actually have follow-up calls. Sometimes individuals will call me, like I'll share my phone number or whatever, and then we end up sort of mentoring each other. It's actually kind of a wonderful community building situation.
Hey, Gene, back here. It's Rob from Iona's way in the back by the corner. Hey, congratulations on everything you guys have accomplished the last couple of years. I wanted to ask you, you said one of the missions is to try to bring the FTD part into ALS. So I wanted to give you a couple of minutes to talk about why you see that being necessary, some of the steps that have been taken, and what you think needs to be done.
Yeah, I think one flavor of this is that we know that drugs get into the pipeline for testing through models. And let's consider for a moment the absurdity that there is not a C9 FTD animal model and a C9 ALS animal model. There is the C9 model. There's not a C9 FTD iPSC line and a C9 ALS iPSC line. There is a C9 iPSC line. So the fact that there's drug testing for C9 specific drugs or drugs for general TDP-43 ALS that accept C9 ALS patients that are not being considered for C9 FTD patients, let alone all of TDP-43 FTD, it just doesn't make sense. These are likely the same biological disease. For C9, it's basically proven it's the same biological disease. And it doesn't make sense to act like something that works for C9 ALS wouldn't work for C9 FTD, at least on the cellular level. Thank you for that softball, Rob.
Okay, we'll have to wrap that up. Thank you, Jean, Mindy, and Cassandra, and please keep up that fantastic work for End the Legacy. Okay, next up we have Jinsy Andrews with their presentation, Accelerating ALS Research Through Innovative Partnerships.
I'll use this podium? Sure. All right, hi, my name is Dr. Jinsy Andrews. I'm the co-chair of NEALS, and I intentionally, I'm also an ALS neurologist and the director of neuromuscular clinical trials at Columbia University in New York. And today I'm going to talk about some strategic partnerships that NEALS as an organization has accomplished and plan to do in order to drive and accelerate research and clinical trials so that we can eventually get to meaningful therapies for both sporadic and genetic ALS. I intentionally did not put names and faces here because I feel like NEALS sometimes is affiliated with individuals or groups of individuals, but I have been the chair for NEALS for the last 4 years, and it's a democratic process, so there's an election, and I have the privilege of being reelected this year for another 4-year term. And I really want to make it a platform where it is us leveraging all together all the people who are touched by ALS in any which way, and NEALS becomes a platform for us to connect and drive innovation so we can move forward together as one, which is why I'm here at the International Alliance. This is actually my first International Alliance meeting. And so, yes, yeah, hey. Every step counts. So I wanted to just kind of introduce, some of you already know what NEALS is, but I want to introduce it to a broader audience and try to see if we can collaborate more globally. The International Alliance, I have to thank them for the opportunity to be here and also participate, and actually their support in us trying to evolve our organization. So NEALS, about us, we have NEALS members. There's now over 155 sites that are academic research centers participating in clinical trials. We have a scientific advisory board, and we have coordinating centers, which has been the heart and soul of the NEALS organization. It started in 1995, and it's grown from a small group of 9 sites to over 155 over the last 25 years. And it was really about trying to organize and network for clinical trials. That was it. It was very simple, but of course, as all of you know, the landscape has evolved, and it has become more of a broader scope. And of course, one of our core strengths is not only the Scientific Advisory Board and the clinical research centers, but also a biorepository that is now being synergized with other biorepositories. So what do? We do clinical trials, obviously, but we've had to grow over the course of time. And so we have tried to leverage our expertise with the experience with ALS, with committees focusing on specific areas. So initially it was just clinical trials focused. So assessments, clinical trial design, coordinator training, evaluator training, investigator training, but that's now scoped out to more trainings that involve respiratory care. So we've partnered with respiratory therapists and pulmonologists, nutritional care. So those are some of our NEALS committees. Genetics, which you just heard about, has been a growing area that we've really relied on those with lived experiences to educate us back and how we can help move those types of clinical trial and development forward. And of course, more recently, the NEALS affiliated trials, so partnering with pharma and investigators that are conducting clinical trials and engaging the community. So it's not just engaging NEALS, engaging the community out, but developing partnerships for us to be informed back in and how we can evolve going forward. So this is the executive committee, all volunteers. So I'm a volunteer co-chair. I have a day job, which is in clinic and doing clinical trials at my university. But I spend a lot of time being the co-chair, and these individuals on the executive committee help lead. Everyone is elected, for the most part, on the leadership committee. We also have a scientific advisory board that does a lot of, these guys have some preclinical science background that help to advise individuals, whether they're investigators, researchers at universities, or at sponsors or pharma companies that are developing or trying to enter into the ALS space. We try to provide guidance for them. And then more recently, I just wanted to put up, we have the NEALS Information and Community Education. We call it the NICE community. This is a very recent development, and the individuals here have come together. They're appointed by the executive committee to try to address real-time hot topics and educational gaps in the field that we need to address. So they help provide guidance on topics that we need to talk about on webinars, for example, or they help us to partner with other organizations in their efforts for community education. And we also try to develop manuscripts, white papers that might address a certain place, a certain item that might be, that might need clarification. And the Global Research and Outreach Leadership Working Group, this is the working group, so these two working groups are within the last 2 years. And this is probably why NEALS is here today. So we have membership. The United States is a very unique place. We're made up of a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds. And I've gotten a lot of questions about our GROW committee. So it's not for NEALS to grow out and try to take over the world, but really create partnerships and collaborations with areas that might not have any infrastructure. So this is where our partnership with the International Alliance has blossomed over the last year. It is not us going out to those regions, but in fact, countries or investigators in certain regions that doesn't have developed consortia or advocacy groups, they've reached out to certain members. For example, I'm from India, so I have colleagues that are in India that have been trying to develop an ALS specialty. So a lot of our membership has special kind of backgrounds that can help kind of mentor these sites. So también yo puedo hablar español y yo trabajo en Nueva York, so mucha gente habla en español. So, and also, my ama never taught me Hindi, but I'm also multilingual. എനിക്ക് മലയാളം പറയാൻ പക്ഷേ എൻ്റെ അമ്മ ഹിന്ദി പഠിപ്പിച്ചില്ല. So I had a lot of Indian colleagues that are from North India that speak Hindi. I just said my mom never taught me Hindi, but I speak Malayalam, which is from South India. So there's a lot of people that are within our membership that can actually, because of their background, mentor in those specific regions. And so this is how our GROW committee has come about. And the next step, which is actually part of our Research Networks panel today, is collaborating globally so that we can connect them to their regional consortia or help develop through the International Alliance advocacy groups. So this is a very different partnership for NEALS. In its history, we haven't done something like this. It's very hard to do. It takes a lot of commitment, again, volunteers. And of course, we are a mighty, mighty consortium of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So we have an executive operation team. These are the employees led by our fearless leader, Carly Allen, and of course, Beverly Smits and Christina Smith, and Jennifer Heinley and Allison Boulay. So we're very lucky to have them, but they do everything. So we don't have a special legal team. We don't have a special social communications, public relations team. We just do everything and try to reach out for help when we need it. And so what have we accomplished? So we're learning as we're going that collaboration has been the key. NEALS has provided the platform for that. And so we try to provide, we have a lot of scientists and researchers that have expertise globally. And so we try to provide feedback to developing programs. We try to encourage people who are outside of our field, epidemiologists, scientific researchers that are studying different areas that might be relevant to ALS to bring them into the field. So those types of scientific partnerships, ongoing collaborations with the Scientific Advisory Board, and then trying to employ group dynamics, so partnering with organizations, with people with lived experience, and bringing them together in small groups and learning how to be more effective in communications, and then driving that learning into innovation. I know it doesn't sound like hard science. It's not what I learned in medical school, but it is extremely effective and really needed in our field. And so one of the ways that we've really fostered this collaboration or strategic partnerships is through the NEALS affiliated trial process. So NEALS provides expertise to investigators or pharma companies that provide that are developing a drug, an experimental drug for ALS, and will help them through the process of design, through preclinical experiments, trying to announce their opening and try to provide milestones, also conducting investigator meetings and engage with the community, and also try to make sure those trials are rigorously designed and that we manage to get through completion. And so we've grown the portfolio, it's still growing, there's still studies that are not there. They're both for sporadic ALS and for genetic ALS, and we're trying to grow that pipeline. In addition, in the US, we've had some growing interest in expanded access or compassionate use programs. So we run these in parallel and have managed to launch them finally at the end of this year in parallel to our clinical trials. And so we've been able to preserve the integrity of clinical trial enrollment while enrolling in these parallel studies for compassionate use. And the last kind of arm to that, so I talked about clinical trials, compassionate use, is also growing this kind of natural history. I started this talk by talking about biorepository, but all of these things require funding, sustainability, and these are hard because funders don't like to fund just infrastructure, people to maintain things. And so we've been fortunate that the NIH and the government has helped to fund a collaboration across pharma, across clinical trial experts and researchers to develop this entity called All ALS. This is an actual partnership with the government funding agency to provide a sustainable, prospectively collected, large natural history repository. And actually we learned how to structure this through the FTD groups. And so FTD, frontotemporal dementia, already had all FTD, and so we learned how to put the pieces together through this. And so AMP-ALS is Accelerated Medicine's partnership. It's already been employed for Parkinson's disease, and it's a group or a partnership between, in the United States, the government funding agency called the NIH and the FDA, which is the regulatory authority that approves drugs. And that partnership is with stakeholders that are developing experimental drugs in ALS. This is the largest consortium in history in the United States for ALS, that's dedicated for ALS. So initially, there'll be 34 sites. There'll be the goal to enroll 2,000 people living with ALS, but also it's the first time we have a multi-center effort to enroll those who are at risk, who carry a genetic mutation that we know may cause ALS. And so through this, we'll be able to collect it, put it into a larger biorepository beyond NEALS that'll be housed at the National Institute of Health. That means that there's funding in the government level to continually sustain this effort, and it's free for researchers to access all over the world, and it will be accessible. So this is, I think, one of the major collaborations with government stakeholders, with people living with ALS and clinical trial experts to really create this large-scale database, because this is the only way we're going to answer the question of how we're going to cure this disease, is really to have these large, big-scale databases and try to synergize them with other databases that are also launching and trying to merge them all together for open science. So I think at the end of the day, we will try to achieve that. Last bit of notes here, I told you about the committees. This wheel had like 4 or 5 committees. Now it's got so many because the field has evolved to kind of target different areas that are important for clinical care and clinical research in ALS. I mentioned the biorepository, which houses spinal fluid, clinical data, serum samples, plasma samples. And of course, our annual meeting, which is in October. Unfortunately, this past year, we had weather. Mother Nature took her toll on us, and we had to do our meeting virtually for the first time since COVID. But we still managed, and interestingly enough, we had the most number of attendees this year virtually than we've ever had in our history. And this continues to be a growing meeting where networking and collaborations kind of come about. And we do a lot of partnership with members to keep them trained. Why? As drugs move through the pipeline, we've been so focused on just finding experimental therapies to do for clinical trials, but what comes next? So with Radicava or Edaravone that was approved in the United States and recent approvals with tofersen or Qalsody, our sites have to be ready for inspection, ready to do high quality studies that'll be investigated or reviewed by multiple regulatory authorities around the world. So we do a lot of member trainings. We do site management training to make sure they're ready and tight in terms of inspections, and make sure that the process, because a drug may be good, but if you don't actually do it well and with high quality and reliability of data collection and assessments, a working drug may not show an effect. And I've actually worked on the back end of large multi-center clinical trials where if you roll centers in or take centers out, you can see an effect of a drug or you lose an effect of a drug. So it's so important. And then, of course, making sure that outcomes are assessed the same way. Investigator trainings obviously is very important as we need to draw more people into the field, and then training for compassionate use as those portfolios continue. And last, people with lived experience has been the center or core of the evolution for NEALS in the last 4 years. So our Clinical Research Learning Institute started at NEALS, now is done broadly. The International Alliance has partnered with us for this activity, which has empowered legislation, advocacy, and awareness. And then the Patient Education Advocacy Committee has also been crucial in trying to provide education to the community and partner and foster these collaborative partnerships. And the Patient Advisory Committee, which is the newest formed group, they actually are key individuals that provide us the leadership and the organization information on how to improve ourselves in the evolving landscape, but also help to provide guidance to the broader community. And so with that, I'll conclude and take questions.
Thank you, Jinsy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. This is Jean with End the Legacy. NEALS is so amazing. You're so amazing. We're so happy you're here, especially as a clinician who's got so many other things on their plate. I had a question as a leadership for NEALS. There's this thing where you guys have done clearly such an amazing job bringing biotech into ALS, and there's all these trials. And then for FTD, there's just much more generous government funding for dementia research than there is for other neurological diseases. Can we not kind of marry these diseases that we know are so connected a little better so that there's a shared pursuit of pharmaceutical development and also generous government funding? So thank you.
Yeah, you guys did a great job on your presentation, by the way. Rocked it. Side note. But Jean, that's a great question. I'll tell you that I actually agree with you that leveraging FTD, but not only just FTD, how about Alzheimer's, how about Parkinson's, how about MS? And I think then we become larger in number and more powerful in motion and action. So I have to say that the NIH is actually very aware, the NINDS, when they're speaking to all ALS and all of the funded programs, they are talking to us about looking at the NIA and also other areas that fund FTD. It's funny, you stole my thunder. We just started talking to the FTD group, and NEALS leadership will now meet regularly with the FTD group to see how we can incorporate or do some shared aligned kind of goals. I also, as NEALS work with the Cures Collective, which is a newly launched program, yay, with IMALS, who has kind of hosted this, but trying to raise awareness, because when we talk about ALS is so small, and just a teaser, they've managed, IMALS has launched a little, I don't know if I can talk about it. They launched about the survey, I got a thumbs up. So there's a survey where more information will come, but really the awareness, the public awareness about ALS is so small. And of course, the prevalence is much less than Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but we are like overshadowed by the other neurodegenerative disorders. If we could talk about neurodegenerative disorders, right? We would have more power in funding, we would have more power in action, we'd have more power in advocacy and legislation. So I think this is where there's so much work. I mean, I'm doing this all on like time outside of my major responsibilities, but trying to get those communities together would be really important. I think that's the future.
A question in the back. Oh, sorry. This one.
So I'm David Busek, a patient fellow, and also went through the Curley training, which was wonderful. I may be borrowing trouble here, but I'm concerned in the next U.S. administration that we're going to be getting a big assault on public funding, and a lot of what you were talking about was public funding. So is NEALS looking at, or other organizations looking at, how we can, are there things that we need to be doing now to help protect the gains that we've gotten in government funding over the last 5 years or so?
That's a great question. You're going to make me sweat up here on the podium. So I will say this is a very critical issue. Right now, because of all of the different clinical trial reads out earlier this year, we have a little bit of a dry spell in terms of late phase clinical trials, and much of what's available to those living with ALS right now is government funded. And much of it in the United States is funded through what's the legislation called Act for ALS. It is very critical right now that people living with ALS, anyone related to ALS, clinicians and specialists, really try to engage their congresspeople or government representatives to ensure why it's important to continue funding. I can't predict what's going to happen with the new administration that's now in place, but we have to act from the grassroots. It works. It really works. Having gone to Congress and having gone to the Capitol Hill, there were people there that had letters from people living with ALS that wrote to them. They actually knew the story. So it's very impactful to really, I think more than coming from me as an ALS clinician, coming from those living with ALS, it actually makes a difference. I've seen it on the European side as well, having people living with ALS or their own family members come and speaking directly to payers, to government entities. I've actually been in the room where it made a complete difference.
Do we have a question online?
So Jessica Mabe from Colombia. Okay. So I wanted to ask you, as you're aware, there are so many parts of the world where currently there's no research or access to clinical trials. What would you say would be the starting point for these countries to get going? Like, what's the first step to start that process?
I think I used to say the first step was trying to get a physician or a researcher involved in ALS. But I don't know if all of you know, I have family members now that are now I've been doing ALS for 20 years. I now have an uncle with ALS and a cousin with ALS. And so trying to go to India and trying to figure it out. I think it actually starts with organizing the people who have the disease and creating kind of a network. So people with the disease or people who've been affected by the disease coming together, creating a network, and then finding a physician or a researcher to kind of champion that with them will help to start creating a network. And then the next step, I think, is trying to create centers that can develop expertise or specialty in that disease. It may not be many, it may be one or two, but that's a start. And then they'll engage others to come into this space. Once you're there, clinical care can start. But the research part comes after that. And that's, I think, how some of these regions without consortia came to NEALS to ask for help, because then we help mentor them and then connect them with sponsors and try to engage their regional. One of the major limitations in some of these underdeveloped areas is the regulatory authority is not ready for them, or they haven't been involved in ALS research. So I think that's why some sponsors may not go to some territories until they have some better relationships with those regulatory authorities that approve drugs.
Matt?
We going? Yeah. Thank you for that presentation. It looks like an incredibly broad and well-structured organisation that you have. You kind of touched on the fact that there's government funding plays a large role in your organisation and the coordination of it. To what extent is there private funding or fundraising, and is philanthropy largely from people who are connected to ALS and MND, or does the American community have some sort of sense of leaning into this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of organizations here that can talk about it, but I think philanthropy mostly comes from those who are touched by ALS or familiar with it. Part of the trouble, so this organization has been around way longer than I have, and so well, that may not be true, but but I think longer than I've been chair anyway, trying to change and evolve it is very tough once it gets this big. So that's been like one of my kind of tasks for the next 4 years. The issue with NEALS is that NEALS in the United States and the other regions are member institutions. So they're not, I'm not an individual member. So what happens is we have state and federal institutions that are part of our membership, and they have lobbying rules. So often I get asked, like, why aren't you going as NEALS or writing a consensus statement about, like, as NEALS? And so we can't do that because there are federal regulations or rules that prevent us from going against maybe an institution's laws. So we have to abide by the rules of the institution, and when we have many institutions, we can't do certain things. But we can definitely educate, right? So I can't do advocacy and lobbying a congressman as NEALS. I can do it as a doctor that treats ALS patients. I can write or present why it's important that this law or legislation is important for people living with ALS or for clinics. So right now the Better Care Act is on the floor to improve funding for ALS clinics, and I can explain why that's important. So that's kind of hard to do. So lobbying or advocating for these laws are hard. So that's why we really need people with the disease or who are connected to them to do it. The private sector is a little shy right now to fund specific drug programs. I mean, they'll fund a lot of education programs and activities and meetings, but we have to try to encourage anyone who's in the funding space, whether that's government entities or private funders, that there is a reason to be in this space. We know a lot about this space. We are working together, and we are not in disagreement that we need to move therapies forward. We have to send that message globally. Because funders like from the United States may fund other regions outside of the United States. People from outside the United States may fund into the United States. So that's a very important thing that we must do as a community now.
Thank you, Jinsey. Just a quick question from me. You obviously have a wide range of committees in the NEALS program, and a couple of those are focused on for people with lived experience. I think the PEACE and the Patient Advisory Committee. What sort of representation of lived experience do you have in your other committees? Do you invite, say, some of your ambassadors or something onto all the other committees as well?
Yeah, we do try to involve the research ambassadors in all of the subcommittees. We do have a specific nominated member that a person with lived experience, whether they're a person with the disease or a caregiver, that becomes an executive advisor to our. These are all recent changes, by the way, and I think we're prompted by people coming to us and telling us that this was needed. And now I think there's more of a push to incorporate what we call patient advisory committees or committees with lived experiences to be part of a steering committee or a data safety monitoring committee. So all of the government-funded studies now incorporate individuals with experience in ALS in those committees, and that's something we should just continue to do more of going forward.
And do you find that the pharma companies are becoming more and more embracing of taking that lived experience voice into their design for trials or studies?
I think from my perspective and what I've experienced, I think that there is kind of an openness for people with lived experience to inform drug companies in their clinical development program. Why? Because right now we don't have very solid footing except for survival as an outcome measure for regulatory authorities. So when they're doing drug development, it's very important for them to hear from those with lived experience what is important to them and why. So we may not have regulatory validated outcome, but we heard from a community of people with lived experience that that was important to them. And regulators across the globe take that into heavy consideration, especially if it is a statistically significant endpoint, regardless of experts' opinion.
Thank you, Jinsey. We'll have to wrap it up now, but please do keep coming to the Alliance meetings.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Okay, moving on to the next talks. So, because innovation and technology are tools that can directly address the wide ranges of challenges that people living with ALS, MND, and their caregivers face while we work towards this vision. This area is a priority for the Alliance. So over the past few years, the Alliance has implemented several projects to advance its technology and innovation strategy, including the Patient Needs Framework. I'll now turn it over to John L. Judge, the Alliance's Innovation and Technology Lead, to explain more about these programs.
Thanks, Gethin. And hello, everyone. It feels amazing to be here in person. I've been working with the Alliance now for about 5-6 years. And in the past few years, I've always participated remotely or virtually. I started that association while I was at Microsoft, working as part of the Windows Eye Gaze technology team, working to really go beyond productivity, but look at more human experiences around expression, around creativity, around other areas that in particular speak to that broader dimension, that broader aspect of ourselves. My background is in design, and although ostensibly I've been sort of part of the Innovation and Technology Advisory Council, I'm not really going to be talking much about technology. But hopefully, based on some of the sessions yesterday and this morning, one of the key takeaways that I hope I leave with you today is to ask that question about how design can help tie some of these disparate but unifying threads together. Now, the work that we started from the Patient Needs Framework actually goes back over a couple of years. And it started with the work in 2022 with the roundtable to really start to get a better understanding of what were some of the challenges that we were coming across from our member organizations. And a key contributor to this was the personas that ALS Canada did. Incredibly detailed, incredibly thorough. And we, in turn, took those and thought about, well, how do we enrich a persona? Because we know that a persona, by its very definition, is something static. And I think one of the things that certainly came out yesterday was the understanding that our experiences aren't static. They're dynamic. They're constantly changing due to a whole range of both internal and external drivers and reasons and so on. So we came up with the idea of using Maslow's hierarchy to start to model and better understand the different dimensions of that and how what we were seeing from the different personas and their respective needs could be then better mapped. And then from there, produce the first version of the patient needs matrix. But of course, over the last couple of years, there's been enormous changes in technology. And what we've been doing, I guess, over the last 6-9 months has been to try to take that landscape view of how are all of these changes occurring, coming together, what impact are they having, and most importantly, perhaps, what can we, from the Alliance perspective, and from your perspective as member organizations, do to make sure that we are representing the needs of our broader community in the most effective and the most valuable way. And that's what much of this session is actually going to focus on. So these were the personas that ALS Canada did a few years ago. Some of you, I'm sure, were intimately familiar with them. And we have Steve, who's a caregiver. Sorry, Henry, who's the caregiver. And then Steve is early onset. And we've then got Moira, who's got slow progressing symptoms. And then Fred, finally, is the one who's got advanced ALS, MND. And we can sort of see that in terms of capturing that broad range of needs, the personas do a really, really good job of that. What we then did was to take these and, as I said, map them to Maslow's hierarchy, and then in that table, start to think about, well, what are these technologies that are currently available and accessible, and how do they map on to these different personas? And then started to think about, well, what are some of the technologies that are within the near term, 12, 18 months, and then even beyond that. And from there, we came across, for the round table, the first version of the matrix, which, as you can see, starts to break down those 5 areas of Maslow's hierarchy into subcategories. And then in turn, we looked at the broad network within the Alliance and started to think, well, what are the different contributions that people are making that we can sort of bring to bear here and place in this particular matrix. And the idea here was really to, I guess, broaden our perspective of the range of different human needs and currently what's available and also what's happening in different parts of the world. But of course, from 2022 onwards, there have been enormous changes in the technology landscape. Need I say it, generative AI has come to the fore in a way that perhaps nobody had really anticipated just a couple of years ago. On top of that, we've got robotics and autonomous devices. There's now the prevalence of low-cost sensors, brain-computer interfaces. The pandemic forced telehealth and progress in telehealth in particular in a way that I don't think anybody had imagined could take place in such a short space of time. We've started over the last couple of years to really hear about and experience through augmented reality technologies, whether it's virtual reality or mixed reality, just the value and the impact that they're providing for people with ALS, but also in terms of helping others understand and appreciate both what that means, but allowing people to be able to express themselves too. One of the areas that we've been involved with in the Alliance over the last 12 months has been the voice preservation project in Colombia that Marcela mentioned yesterday. And that in turn gave us the opportunity to start to really better understand a broad range of considerations that from a low middle income country perspective, that perhaps from a technology point of view, particularly given my background and the area in which we've worked, we generally don't tend to consider. Whether it's to do with infrastructure, environment, affordability, access, the regulatory framework in a particular country, etc. All of these considerations, and we learned a lot about these as well yesterday in terms of some of the challenges and constraints and issues that people are facing. And of course, recognizing now, and it was clear, I think, over the yesterday in particular, that desire, that earnest wish to connect with everybody, to make sure that the inequity that exists globally is something that we collectively try to address in the best way that we can. Which then started, I guess, for us, from the Alliance perspective, a period of introspection. So how do we, from our point of view, respond to this in the most effective way that we can, in line with the vision of creating that world free of ALS, MND? And in many ways, this session, this presentation, is an invitation for us all to help shape that future. Over the last few months, then, we started to jot down some of the activities that we were either directly involved in or indirectly, and started to see where they appeared on the spectrum. But the thing that really, I think, accelerated our thinking was putting together the Day in the Life of Experience Suite, which we're going to be setting up later on today, which will be open over the next couple of days, and there'll be more information on how you can sort of register and go up to visit on the 7th floor. Because all of a sudden, the concept of reserving a suite and then looking at each part of the suite itself, whether it's the living area, the kitchenette, the bedroom, the storage areas, the bathroom, etc., it brought home in a incredibly direct and impactful way that these are the parts and parcel of routines of everyday life. And so the suite is really intended to showcase and illustrate a broad range of technologies, whether they're analog adaptations for holding a phone or helping a person eat and so on, or whether they're digital or virtual and so on. There's that whole spectrum of technologies in situ, and you'll be able to experience these firsthand and also talk with a range of experts and partners and collaborators who've kindly donated a lot of the equipment here. So we started to put together a very detailed spreadsheet, and just to make it a little bit more readable, and we'll of course be sharing all of this afterwards, you can see that very quickly, this started to fill up in a way that we hadn't quite anticipated. Lots of gaps, but equally, I think it helps us sort of understand that there's an enormous amount of innovation and adaptations that are already available that you may not be aware of. And further, looking at the personas and then revisiting them through this broader perspective, we're able to enrich those even further. Starting to include aspects, for example, from Moira's perspective, the sociocultural aspects of her experience, which are really, really important to her. Being mobile, being independent. For Fred, access to technology in a way that will make a significant difference to his life. And then we also further developed, based on the recent work of the last few years of Maslow's hierarchy, extended it beyond the 5 and had greater levels of granularity. And in many ways, we can almost start to break these up into the bottom 4, which are to do very much with physical, let's say, day-to-day living, and perhaps where much of the attention and focus has been to date. And then when you look at self-actualization, cognitive, aesthetic, and transcendence, those are perhaps dimensions, aspects of the human experience that haven't been considered in as much detail. And then mapping that directly to the personas, we can see that there's a very, very strong correlation. This then led us to start developing, in many ways, the meat here is perhaps a model, going back to the earlier question of how can we, from the perspective of ALS, M&D, start to have a more direct, more insightful conversation from each of these personas across each of those different dimensions of Maslow's hierarchy. And what I've illustrated here is purely for discussion, it's qualitative, and perhaps it represents that particular point in time for each one of these personas. But the key thing here, I hope, is that this is a model or a framework that can be used more broadly, and in turn represent a person's individual experience, their individual journey, and their relationship with what's important to them, almost certainly at that sort of fundamental physical level, but also at that more emotional, that more existential level as well. And this then, of course, led to a further mapping exercise, which you can start to see the range of technologies, the range of items now, which we've started to populate in the matrix, has grown enormously just in the last couple of years. And even here, I don't think there's still further work to be done. I don't think it really captures everything that is perhaps available. So we'd invite you all to certainly contribute and feedback to this. The approach to analysis that we've had is, of course, that there's been a growth in a range of different technology solutions. I think this is also helping to deepen our understanding of the experience of PALs and CALs, and in particular, the diversity of perspectives that engaging with Colombia and other areas in the Global South has opened us to. And one of the things that we then started to do, thinking about this broader landscape, is if we take this and develop it further, what does this mean in terms of global availability? And this is, once again, pretty subjective, intended to really invite or provoke conversation and discussion. The darker green cells are the ones where there is perhaps strong coverage from a global perspective, or strong areas where there have been industry investments or areas of academic research and so on. And what we're then planning to do in terms of moving forward with this is using this and the preceding information as input in helping us shape a better understanding of what can we, from an alliance perspective, based on your input, based on your participation, based on your collaboration, do that will help make a difference from an innovation, from a technology perspective, I guess, but focusing most importantly on the broad diversity of human needs that will ultimately make a difference to the community. So we're planning a roundtable early next year, and we'll start to send out more information over the next month or so. But I would really, really love for everybody to be able to contribute and participate in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And I'd just like to emphasise that it'd be great to have as much participation as possible in those roundtables, because it can really guide the way these projects go forward. If we don't have any input, we don't know where to go. Do we have any questions? Oh, one at the back there.
Hello, Shannon.
Hey, Manji.
Hi, I'm Dr. Himanji from Home in here. My suggestion or an idea is that as an alliance, if we project a problem statement and we call all the engineers or students globally to solve the problem statement by technology and come up with prototypes. So Alliance can get many solutions to one of them, and then maybe our IT committee can choose one design which we think is more feasible or appropriate or the best design, and then help the student or engineer to get that prototype in market so that the product will come out for all the ALS patients. So it's an idea which I think as an alliance can take it forward.
No, thank you, Himanji. I completely agree as well. I think certainly over the last few years, we've had lots of experience working very closely with students from across different universities, and the different perspective that they bring has been enormously helpful, both in terms of freshness of ideas, not being tied down to perhaps legacy technology. So that's been really, really important. And I think that's something that we are always actively looking to get more and more involved in.
Like, we are doing it with IIT Mumbai. So we are 10 students that, okay, now we want to develop something or maybe a walker which the F1 patient can use for transport. So some kind of problem, a specific problem, and then the student come out with an option. So I think we can use that idea globally.
I would absolutely love to learn more, and yeah, I'll speak with you afterwards, Himanji, and look to see what we can do to support.
Thank you.
We have a virtual question. Angela Harris from MND Scotland is saying, great presentation, Janelle, thank you. We would love to be involved in the roundtables. How do we do that?
So we'll start sending out information in January in terms of pre-reading materials, just so that we can in many ways establish a bit of a baseline of, I guess, some of the technologies, some of the advancements, and some of the potential areas where we see considerable opportunity for impact. But also seeding it with questions. In particular, where do people see gaps and where do people see opportunities? As part of that, we also intend to perhaps provide a couple of provocations in terms of areas or aspects that maybe we haven't quite yet sort of bottomed out, but nonetheless, based on some of the conversations that we've already seen and the presentations from yesterday, trying to get that broad and as diverse a perspective as possible, I think is going to be absolutely key to us.
Question at the back.
Yeah, Steve, husband, caregiver. How do you go about gathering the data from caregivers to put on that spreadsheet?
Yes, a couple of ways. Certainly the information from ALS Canada served as a fantastic starting point because they went through a pretty thorough, pretty rigorous process of interviewing, observation, shadowing, standard design, ethnographical type of approach. And within the Alliance itself, the projects that we've done and also the various advisory committees which have representations of carers in addition to PALS as well, their input has been absolutely essential in pretty much every single activity that we undertake.
Okay, and just one last quick question. What do you see as perhaps the coolest bit of new tech coming in at the moment that can really revolutionise care or quality of life for people living with MND?
Wow, I mean, I think in many ways it isn't about technology. I see technology playing a subservient role to ultimately what matters. And those, I think, are the top 4 levels of, and I hate calling it Maslow's hierarchy because it almost sort of suggests that you progress up the different levels. I see it as something which is far more circular, something which is ever present all of the time. But I do think that those upper 4 areas are the ones that give us perhaps the greatest opportunity, the greatest potential to make a difference. And over the next few months, I think with your input and with your insight, we'll come up with technology ideas and innovations that I think, could change the world.
So watch this space. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Jonelle. Okay, it brings us to the end of today's session. I've had the pleasure of moderating 4 brilliant talks, and it's now time for a short break. But just before we go, we're going to retake the group photo from yesterday, so same spot at the bottom of the stairs. So can everyone just head out there before you grab your coffees or your food? And we're all back in here at 11:10 on the dot for the next session. Thank you.